Warren Buffett actually has the best argument, not the best, but one of the better arguments I've ever read for progressive taxation. So he says, think of the following thought experiment. I'm Warren Buffett, and I have this talent, this ability, natural ability, learned ability, to identify undervalued stocks, undervalued investment opportunities, to purchase them, to hold on, and to make a return, okay? Now imagine myself born with this particular ability, the same way Michael Jordan has ability for playing basketball, or Yo-Yo Ma's an ability for the cello. Imagine me born in Bangladesh, with the government and institutional structure of Bangladesh, and me having that ability. Now, in Bangladesh, that ability, most likely, right, would never be allowed to flower. In fact, the return on that ability would be minimal. Most likely, the greatest, in the great majority of cases.
Which of the 50 states is Bangladesh in?
No. The point being, right, that in the great majority of cases, that ability I would never be able to capture the economic value on that ability, because of the lack of institutional fortitude in the society and in the government, which allows me to capture those returns.
This is the argument that the rich essentially have a greater stake in the game.
They get a greater return on the ability of our government to enforce a system of contracts and trusts and all the institutional things. They get a greater return on that than someone who is a manual laborer.
Let me ask you, Michael. So essentially, Chris is making the argument that the rich get greater services than the poor from the government. They have more to learn. They have more to protect from property rights, national defense, whatever it may be. How do you respond to that?
Let's see, grandmother, great-grandmother. I'm fourth generation removed from slavery. My family moved into Pennsylvania, got property, became sought-after stonemasons and bricklayers, and they worked. They took care of the family.
Right.
My cousins and I were the first generation to go to college. I'm a capitalist. When it came time for me to collect enough degrees, I went out and decided to make money. They went on and got PhDs. In America, as I said from the Mansfield room at the Capitol, I stood in the Mansfield room and talked to the nation. My mother could have hoped but scrubbed floors there. My son will be able to stand there and talk to the world. A person that was fortunate enough to accumulate wealth through inheritance or by earning it did not hold me back. I went to school without the benefit of affirmative action. I got a good education. I remember when my mother got a raise of $20 a week. She invested in me. So I find that to be a specious argument, because everything you're saying, I can go back and say we did not have indoor plumbing, we did not have electricity, right. The road was a dirt road, and we still had quality education. We were expected to learn. I moved forward, and here I sit today.
What was the quality education?
I went to a public school that insisted you learn.
But it was a public school.
It was a public school. And while you're on that point, I find nowhere in the Constitution, if I'm correct in what you're going to say, where the government's job is to take care of public schools. I mean, I think that is part of the problem.
I understand. I feel like you just endorsed Warren Buffett's argument.
I didn't endorse Warren Buffett's.
Michael made an opportunity
argument. Just because there are public schools that work doesn't mean that's the only model for education that could work.
Exactly.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying about the point that I was trying to make is that, and the point Buffett was making was like, yes, it was his patriotic argument, right?
But here's the problem with your point is, to your point, you're saying that school would have had to have, if that school were not located in Chestnut Hill or Fairfax or something, it would not have the same quality of education as the rural school I went to in Quakertown, Pennsylvania. It had I got a very good education. I lacked and wanted for nothing. So growing up poor did not hold me back simply because the person ever had more money. As Sean Hannity says, a poor person has never given me a job.
Here's the problem with Buffett's argument as I see it. I take the issue of Bangladesh. I lived in South Asia for some time. I'm fairly familiar with Bangladesh. Bangladesh is a country with failed institutions, with an oppressive government, and sort of it's a backward society. Now, the fact that the United States does not have these problems gives Charlie Rangel a claim on my income. How?
Exactly.
Because the difference between not having those problems, right, and having those problems is a difference between essentially a robustly functioning state and a non-robustly functioning state, and the state needs to be funded.
So you're saying
that's the difference.
The state is enabling that opportunity.
Of course it is.
And those who take advantage of it, therefore...
Look, go try to enforce contracts. or try to have any kind of institutional
it
structure
sounds-
that
it
will
sounds to
produce
me-
wealth in a country without a state that functions.
Rather than the term state, I would argue this, that we create among ourselves as a society a set of public structures that allow individuals and businesses to succeed. Contracts, a court system, roads and bridges, a public school system. I would argue that a functional healthcare system ought to be in that category. And people benefit from that. And in order to benefit from that, we have to pay a certain level of taxation. Otherwise, we return to the law of...
One thing where I think you really are wrong, though, is that the difference between us and Bangladesh isn't that we have a successful capitalist government that's made possible by our, a successful capitalist economy that's made possible by our state. We have a state that's made possible by a successful capitalist economy. You could photocopy the U.S. Constitution and airdrop copies on Bangladesh. You're not going to get California out of that.
But okay, so that gets into an interesting question. I agree. I mean, and obviously the chicken and egg question of development that you're getting to, which is the both sort of entrepreneurialism and risk taking.
It's a solved question.
No.